Let's move on to talk about a fairy tale that's come to an end. Fairy tales do come to an end eventually. Bayer Leverkusen had a 462-day fairy tale, and it's come to an end quite dramatically, I would have thought, Andy. And their coach, Xabi Alonso, isn't too happy about the way it came to an end either.
Yeah, so they lost their first Bundesliga game in 462 days last weekend. Of course, they in between lost the Europa League final to Atalanta. Don't worry, I wasn't going to leave that out. But they'd not lost against German opposition for coming on a year and a half. The last game they'd lost is the last game of 2022-23 season, the sort of dead rubber for them against Bochum. And really, you did wonder after this game that they lost against Leipzig, Leverkusen and their players would be praised by Xabi Alonso. You know, you think a coach after that sort of run was going to go, oh, we lost today, but I want to thank the players for everything they've done over the past year plus, etc. And Alonso was so annoyed. He was so annoyed by it. And there are a couple of reasons why he was annoyed by it. I think, one, it was a very avoidable defeat. Two, because they made similar mistakes to the one they made in the first game of the season, where they were 2-0 up against Borussia Mönchengladbach, lost the 2-goal lead, and fortunately for them, in that situation, Florian Wirtz scored a 101st minute winner, and they ended up with the points. Now this time, they were 2-0 up, and they were absolutely hammering Leipzig, by the way. And we're talking about numbers before. If you look at the numbers from this game, if you read the stats from the game and then the score, you would be flabbergasted, because Leverkusen dominated again. But one of the things that's been so great about them under Xabi Alonso has been their intensity. Defensively, that intensity is not there at the moment, which is a huge, huge problem for them. Now, of course, the transfer window's shut. They've not lost the players that a lot of people thought they would, and Jonathan Tah, who looked like he was going to go to Bayern, he didn't actually go in the end, and it looks like he's going to run down his contract, which is going into its last year now. He's really important for them. But the thing about this is that they're 2-0 up, cruising. They let in this really cheap goal to Kevin Campbell on the stroke of half-time, and then Leipzig hit back. Lois Openda scores a pair. They go on and win the game. What a player Openda is, by the way. But it sort of plays into what some people from the club were saying to me when I was over there a few weeks ago, and notably the CEO, Fernando Caro, who's been there for a long time. He said, well, when we're talking about our competition in this league, we're really talking about Leipzig. We're talking about, and Leipzig did turn out to be pretty good competition last weekend. We're talking about Dortmund. We're talking about those other teams, really. No one at the club really wanted to say, well, we're champions and we're defending our title. No one beat us last season, so let's see them come and try this season. You know, they didn't really want to go out there and say that, because I guess there's an understanding that keeping up that intensity is really, really difficult. Now, when we talk about Leverkusen's intensity, we talk about the closing periods of games, because there have been so many comebacks to keep that unbeaten run going. We've seen it at the end of last season. We've seen it at the start of this, both in the Super Cup and in that first game against Mönchengladbach. But they've all been kind of rescue acts. So we've almost forgotten the bit where they've dug themselves a hole in the first place. And so that is what Xabi Alonso is going to be focusing on, I think.
Look, I'll tell you what, I saw this match, Nicky, because Lars Sivertsen suggested it for his Game of the Week last week. So I'm not putting pressure on you. We'll get Game of the Week from you later on. But the thing that I noticed straight away was that there was a moment, and it probably was an Openda moment. He scored 2 goals. He scored a brace after all. And he was, like Andy says, he was remarkable on the right wing the whole way. But it seemed like there was a moment when Leipzig just kind of clicked in and realised we can win this. And that Bayer Leverkusen didn't have an answer to it. The defence was weak. I wonder if eventually you can't see the wood for the trees as a football team that has won 462 days of domestic matches, unbeaten, that eventually you kind of don't realise that you're soft in the middle, if that makes sense, which is the real argument that that Xabi Alonso was saying. That
Exact
they were
words
soft.
that he used. Exact words that he used.
Yeah.
He called them
They
soft.
were soft. But you can see it. You could almost see it in this match. Is that a result of, you know, the comfort zone that you've been in these 462 days?
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation about comfort zones. One of the things I was curious to see inside a little look at the numbers is whether, because fatigue is a thing, because this is a team that does play in a very intense way, that does get in opponents' faces. And I think in the Bundesliga, they'd covered the fourth most kilometres of any team in the league. So they're one of the teams that runs the most in the Bundesliga. And I was curious to see, is some of this just tiredness? Everyone's had a long season, going into Euros, coming back for another season. And again, in the numbers, it doesn't bear out. Actually, I think they're now third this season in distance covered. So that they're absolutely still covering the ground. But I do think it's impossible not to be affected by what's gone before. And I suppose there must come some point when you are so used to things going your way that you almost lose that understanding of how to react in the moments when they start to not. And I think that's complicated because, of course, we are talking about a team that came back from being behind lots. But that's almost easier to do. If you're behind in a game, you know you've got to score a goal at the end. You know what you're trying to do. When you're in front in a game and then it starts slipping away from you, that's a different psychological thing that you're playing with. And look, without wanting to just bring it back to the Italian team, there have been a few teams that have shown at the end of last season, yes, this is a good football team, but there are ways to get at them. Because Karabakh did it in the semi-final, both legs. It is possible to get at this team, and I'm certain that other teams have taken some lessons from that as well.
Yeah, I think if you look at that whole Europa League run, it felt like Atalanta was sort of the person in the pub that when you see someone putting loads of coins in the machine, but it not paying out, you know, there's a lurker by the bar.
Yeah,
I felt like Atalanta were the lurker. They'd been sort of working it out gradually, and they're like, right, okay, this is going to pay out for us, and it did pay out for them. And I think Nicky's absolutely right. Though, like we said, the situations that they've been getting themselves in is something that's been kind of unaddressed, particularly since they won the league. You know, a lot of those comebacks came after they won the league, and they were preserving that unbeaten run. So really, it was almost academic. It's not to say it's not a great achievement. It's not to say it's not an incredible thing to do, but it's something that they've needed to get after. And, you know, Lucas Radetsky said to me last season, he said, intellectually, you'd think that it's not possible to keep coming back like this. But then it gets to a point where you do it so many times that the players start thinking, yeah, it's fine. We can dig ourselves out of any situation. And eventually there comes to a point, there's a situation that you can't dig yourselves out of. And this was it. So
Can I just add one thing onto that? There was on that thought as well, though, because I do think that we all do this. I do this. We take how things ended and treat them as an inevitable narrative.
Yes.
In all of those late comebacks, there is an element of chance. There's always an element of chance of football. There's always an element of the ball coming off the foot at the right angle at the right time. And to some extent, there has been luck as well in this unbeaten run. No team goes that long unbeaten without some luck. And maybe this is just the day when the luck doesn't go their way.
But I guess the point is not that that's the truth, but what do the players actually believe?
Yeah,
that's the point, isn't it? And I guess, like in terms of the defensive side of it, they made so many mistakes in these opening games. I mean, they conceded 2 in the Super Cup. Could have been more against Stuttgart. They conceded 2 against Borussia Mönchengladbach, who, with the best will in the world, are not one of the better teams in the division. And they've conceded 3 against Leipzig, who are excellent and made the most of limited chances. And they did because they've got an enormous amount of talent. And I think they'll develop quite nicely over the season. But I wonder, once he's cooled down, and Alonso talked about how annoyed he was that because there's the international break, he can't get the players in and like work on every detail and really drill into them. But I wonder if it's actually quite a good thing for them all to go off to their different countries and him to go off to his training sessions with 4 people where he just gets out there on the grass and shows what a brilliant passer of the ball he is still. and everyone just cools off a little bit because it has been a long time. Like you said, 462 days, that is a long time. And to realise that that's done, they haven't got the pressure to keep that up anymore, to keep that run going. And they can just be like, okay, how do we deal with this season? We know what we do well. Let's forget about the numbers and let's work out what we have to do to be the best team in this division all over again.